Steve loves running trails. It's like a little mini holiday from the city. As soon as his feet hit the dirt, it's like the tension just melts away. He's always been an active guy, but more cycling than running. However, in 2020, with the pandemic, he lost his daily dose of exercise from commuting to work on his bike and decided to take another look at running. It had been 40 years, so he was a little hesitant, but he told himself, let's just give it 10 runs. Before he even got to 10, he was hooked, and he was immediately drawn to the trails. The forest near his house became his refuge from the hustle and bustle of modern life. However, after a few months, he started to notice a tightness in his Achilles tendon, and he tried to continue to train through it, but as the weeks and months passed, it got worse and worse. He went to see a local physiotherapist who diagnosed him with Achilles tendinopathy. Over the next couple of years, he tried a bunch of stuff to fix the issue. He did make some progress with physical therapy. However, in 2022, he also tried shockwave and PRP, and neither worked. By the end of 22, he barely ran at all. Steve was at his wit's end. He was fed up and really worried that he might need surgery, and he even went ahead and booked an appointment with a surgeon. However, he got lucky, and the surgeon discouraged him from going ahead with surgery. So Steve went on a mission to find answers, and the more he learned about Achilles tendinopathy, the more he became convinced that rehab was the answer. So Steve went back to basics, heavy strength training for the calf, and very, very slowly and methodically increasing his running to stimulate the tendon to adapt to the increase in stress. He started with very, very short run walks and methodically increased the distance and duration little by little throughout 2023. And in spite of a few setbacks, Steve was able to get himself all the way back to 20-minute continuous running. During the course of his rehab, Steve had come across Brody Sharp's Run Smarter podcast. And Brody's no-nonsense, back-to-basics, no-frills approach that focuses on long-term sustainable change really resonated with Steve. And with Brody's help, Steve was able to slowly build up to 45-minute runs that were continuous running and even started to pepper in a few strides. However, the trails still eluded him. Anytime Steve would venture into the forest, the uneven terrain would just immediately play havoc with his tendon. He also had trouble with intensity. His tendon could handle going long and slow, but if he tried a little bit of short and fast, the tendon would get angry. As luck would have it, Steve heard me on Brody's podcast ranting and raving about how runners need to focus on the specific thing that causes them issues with their running. So he wandered over to my show and found one of my episodes on tendon rehab. He decided to reach out to us for help to get to that next level. When we first met for his free call, Steve was in a pretty good place with his running overall. He could handle up to 15 miles a week. However, he had to do it all on the road because if he even tried a little bit on the trails, his Achilles tendon would flare up. And this just wasn't enough for Steve. He really wanted to get back on the trails. That's where he found his peace, and that is what he wanted back. Steve shared with me on the free call that the podcast episode on tendons had really resonated when I spoke specifically about an analogy of a tendon being sometimes like a teenager, in that the tendon can do some of the things that it needs to be able to do, but not all of them. Kind of like a teenager. Now, Steve's Achilles tendon couldn't tolerate trail running because of the variability in stress on the tendon. So some steps with the uneven terrain would put more stress on the Achilles tendon than it could handle. And it was the same reason he was having trouble with higher intensity or faster running. When he tried to put that higher level of stress through the tendon, it couldn't handle it, and that's when it would get angry. Uneven terrain or speed work represented Steve's line. If he crossed it, the tendon would flare up and get angry. So that is exactly what we had to do. So we devised a 3-phase plan to increase the resilience in the tendon so it could handle those stresses, and Steve would be able to go back to running trails. First, we'd continue the routine that Steve had been following because he was doing an excellent job of strengthening his calves and his Achilles tendons. Second, we gradually sprinkle in short bouts of faster intensity running, constantly adding a little bit more of this each week. Third, we layer on a very small dose of trail running that we'd systematically increase each week, allowing the tendon to adapt to the uneven terrain and the alterations in stress that it poses. And over the following 3 months, we saw Steve's tendon become stronger and stronger. And it did grumble a bit when we got him to do certain sprint workouts, but it never really flared up. Last week, he ventured out into the forest again. 1 hour of trail running was on the agenda for today. It was a beautiful winter's morning, and Steve was back where he belonged. And now that Steve's tendon can handle the forest again, Steve set his sights on a 20-mile trail race in the spring. Like I said, when I met Steve, he wasn't in such a bad spot with his running. In spite of a very nasty, troublesome problem with the tendon, he had managed to get back all the way to running quite a lot. It was just the trails that caused problems. After 2 years of battling to get this far, nobody could have blamed Steve for just settling with what he had. But that's not Steve's way. He really wanted to get back to the trails. And if there was even a small chance that he could get it, he was going to take that chance. Lots of runners have a line with their running. One specific thing that they avoid doing because of a previous injury or problem that they won't do because they're scared it's going to flare it up and put them out of running completely. Some runners avoid long distances. Some avoid higher mileage weeks. Some avoid hills. Some avoid sprinting. I even knew one runner who wouldn't run on the side of the road where the camber went down to his left because it would put the stress on his knee in a very specific way. If you have a line with your running, you're going to need to cross it. It's just going to keep closing in on you. And as the years pass, you'll be able to do less and less. You'll have to avoid more and more stuff until eventually you're barely running at all. And that's when you'll quit. Don't let it come to that. If you have a line, cross it. If you're worried that crossing it is going to put you out of running altogether, then get some help. We'd love to help you. Our expert team do this all the time, and we can guide you just like we did Steve to cross your line and get all the way back to pain-free training. So just click the link in the description to book a call with us. We'll have a chat, see if we're a good fit to work together.